Could silence alone have stopped him, or did the guard need to move first? The question hovered like smoke over the steel table, unspoken, unwanted. No one dared put it into words, except her. She sat at the far end, away from the cluster of brass and uniforms who carried themselves like weight was something only rank could bear. Her hands were still, folded neatly in front of her, as if discipline alone could hold them steady. But inside she was restless. Her heartbeat was too loud in her chest, like she feared it might betray her. "Sir," she began, her voice measured, quiet, but sharp enough to slice through the scrape of papers and the clink of metal cups. "What if silence buys us more than noise ever could?" The air shifted, chairs creaked, eyes turned, some rolling, some narrowing. A couple of younger men smirked like she'd told a joke in a language they didn't respect. At the head of the table, the commander didn't answer. He just leaned back, jaw clenched, his silence saying more than any reprimand. His eyes locked on her, not angry, not doubtful, just unreadable. And maybe that was worse. She didn't drop her gaze, not this time. The rain outside hammered against the hangar roof, filling the pause with a rhythm that reminded her of rotor blades slicing through fog. It was a soldier's kind of music, steady, relentless, inescapable. She counted the beats until someone else finally broke. "You can't babysit a prisoner with silence," a major scoffed, tossing a folder down. "You put a man like that in cuffs, you need deterrence. You need firepower. He twitches, he dies. That's what works. Always has. Always has." Her lips pressed tight at the arrogance in those words. She thought of another night, another prisoner, another always has. She remembered the wrong twitch, the hesitation, the sound she could never unhear. Her thumb brushed the scar on her wrist, thin, pale, almost invisible now. No one asked about it anymore, but it was always there. A reminder, a brand she carried inside skin and memory. "What if the first move isn't ours?" she asked again, softer now but pointed. "What if silence forces his hand before we waste ours?" The laughter this time was low, muttered, shaking heads and crooked grins. The commander didn't laugh. He finally leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice even. "You want silence, Captain." His tone made the ranks sound like both burden and dare. "Fine, you'll have it. You'll guard him yourself. You'll keep your eyes on him and you'll move first if you need to." A punishment disguised as a task, or maybe a test. She couldn't tell. But the moment his words dropped, she knew the decision had already been made for her. The meeting broke. Chairs scraped. Boots struck concrete in sharp cadence as they filed out. She stayed seated, letting them go, feeling the emptiness expand around her until only the rain and the drip-drip of a leak in the far corner remained. When she rose, it was slow, controlled, like any movement faster than thought would betray nerves she refused to show. Her reflection caught briefly in the darkened window, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, a shadow beneath cheekbones hardened by months too far from sleep. She almost didn't recognize herself anymore. But there wasn't time for mirrors. There never was. The holding cell wasn't far. Just down 2 corridors, past doors marked with numbers that felt meaningless until you learned the stories behind them. Rooms where men had screamed. Rooms where confessions bled into silence. Rooms she tried not to think about. When she reached his, the guard outside gave her a look. Not questioning, not challenging, just searching. Maybe for a reason. Maybe for reassurance. She gave him neither. Just a curt nod, the kind you gave when orders had already decided the outcome. The door opened with a metallic groan. He sat chained at the wrists, posture too relaxed for a man whose freedom hung on steel and keys. His eyes lifted when she entered, dark, unblinking, weighing her like a ledger. For a heartbeat, the silence between them was suffocating. She didn't speak first, she refused. Instead, she studied him the way she studied storm fronts when she was still a pilot, back when she had wings. Assessing direction, weight, the invisible violence in the air. His chest rose, steady, calm. His hands rested easy, not straining against the cuffs. He was waiting too. For what? That was the question. The rain drummed louder against the walls, as if the world itself wanted to warn her. Finally he smiled, just faintly, enough to say he had seen something, or maybe he wanted her to think that. She forced herself to breathe, slow, measured, just like when she lined up a shot through glass, wind tugging the scope, heartbeat rattling in her ears. This wasn't any different, not yet. But deep down something stirred, a memory clawing to the surface, another smile, another man in chains, another moment where she believed silence would hold, and then the snap of bone, the scream, the wrong twitch. She pushed it down, buried it. This wasn't then, this wasn't him. But she couldn't shake the question. Could silence alone stop him? Later that night, when the hangar lights dimmed and the others buried themselves in routine, she sat outside his cell with only a chair, her rifle across her lap. The kind of vigil no one wanted, but someone had to keep. The corridor smelled faintly of oil and damp stone. Every sound mattered: the scrape of a chain, the groan of pipes, the heavy breath of guards shifting weight. But more than sound, it was silence she kept listening to. Because silence could deceive. Silence could hold 1,000 intentions, and hers had to be stronger. Her eyes never left him through the narrow pane of reinforced glass. He didn't move much, just sat there, watching the floor, sometimes humming under his breath, a tune she couldn't place and maybe didn't want to. It made her skin tighten, though, like hearing the last note of a lullaby turn into something else. She thought of her brother then, his voice when he sang badly on purpose to make her laugh, the way his silence had spoken louder the night he left for his last deployment. She never saw him again. The memory pressed on her chest until she felt she couldn't breathe. But she sat straighter, forcing the weight into posture, into poise. That was the only way. One of the younger guards wandered down, pausing at her chair. He shifted awkwardly, clearly wanting to say something but unsure if he should. She spared him a glance, enough to give permission without words. "Do you think he's scared?" the boy asked, nodding toward the prisoner. She tilted her head. "Why?" "Because if it was me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I'd be terrified, sitting there, waiting, not knowing if someone going to decide I don't make it out." She studied him, barely 20, face still soft where war hadn't carved lines yet. She wanted to tell him not to ask questions like that. Not here. Not where the answers mattered too much. But instead she softened. Just slightly. "Fear isn't always loud," she said. "Sometimes it looks exactly like calm." He nodded, chewing that over, then drifted away, leaving her with the silence again. Her words stayed behind, though. They cut her as much as him. Because wasn't that exactly what she was afraid of? That calm, his calm, wasn't fear at all. It was patience. A waiting game, a trap in human skin. And when silence finally broke, it would be too late. She didn't sleep, not really. Just closed her eyes in pieces, head against the wall, rifle always in reach. She dreamt of nothing but noise, explosions without sound, screams without mouths, a silence too heavy to lift. When dawn came, pale light leaking through cracks in the concrete, she straightened, eyes burning. The prisoner was already awake, sitting the same way he had all night, watching her now, not the floor. His lips curved, barely as if to say, "You blinked first." And she realized then. Silence wasn't a weapon. It was a test. And the question hadn't been answered yet. Why hadn't she told them the whole truth? Maybe because truth carried a weight heavier than any rifle. Maybe because once you spoke it, there was no taking it back. She sat outside the cell, dawn light spilling cold across the corridor, her back pressed against concrete that felt more like stone than man-made walls. Her rifle rested across her lap, safety clicked on, but her finger curled around the trigger guard as if the weapon itself was the only anchor she had left. Inside he hadn't moved, not really, Just small shifts, a roll of the shoulders, the occasional blink, the way his tongue brushed over cracked lips. But his stillness wasn't weakness. It was theater, she knew it. He was waiting. And that terrified her, because waiting was his strength, and hesitation had always been her weakness. The first time she had hesitated, she was 19, still too new, still trying to prove she deserved the rifle they'd put in her hands. Her squad had been pinned on a rooftop, trapped by a sniper they couldn't see. She had him in her sights, clear, breath steady, finger tightening. And then a child had stepped into the alley below him, a girl no older than 10 carrying a bucket of water. For a second the shot blurred. The world tilted. She blinked, afraid she might hit the child. That second was enough. The enemy sniper moved. Her best friend, Corporal Dwyer, didn't. The round took him through the neck before she fired. The report of her rifle came too late. Always too late. And when the alley cleared, the child was gone. She never knew if the hesitation saved her or not. She only knew what it had cost. Now at 33, sitting in this corridor, that same question still burned in her chest. Was silence her shield or her cage? The sound of boots broke her reverie. The commander approached, his steps unhurried, but heavy with the kind of authority that didn't need to rush. He paused in front of her chair, looking down without a word. She stood, rifle at her side, spine straight, the posture drilled into her bones. "Report," he said simply. No movement, minimal rest. He hasn't spoken. The commander studied her, not the prisoner, not the cell, her, as though she were the one under guard. "You don't sleep when you're posted," he said. It wasn't a question. She shook her head once. "Not my habit." His jaw tightened. "You'll need clarity soon." "I'm clear." He considered her for another beat, then leaned slightly closer, his voice lowering. "Don't think your theories buy you time. Silence doesn't win wars, men do." Her eyes flickered to the prisoner. "Maybe, but silence chooses when men move." The commander didn't respond. He turned and walked away, leaving her words hanging in the stale air, unanswered. By mid-morning, a routine had set in. Guards rotated, food trays slid through slots, and the cell remained unchanged. One man, one chain, one silence. She stayed close, never more than a few feet from the door. Every time he shifted, she watched. Every time he scratched his temple or flexed his fingers, she noted it, catalogued it. Because sometimes the smallest tells revealed the storm before it broke. And yet, the longer she studied him, the more the edges of her certainty blurred. There was something in his calm, something familiar. Not like the enemy fighters she'd known, reckless, wild, eager for spectacle. No, this man's stillness reminded her of someone else. Her brother. The thought hit like a blow. She tried to push it down, but the resemblance stuck, not in face, not in body, but in presence. The same quiet defiance her brother carried the night before his last deployment. The same way he hadn't needed to speak to tell her he wasn't coming back. She shifted in her chair, discomfort crawling across her skin. She couldn't let that thought root itself, couldn't afford to humanize the man inside. But wasn't that already happening? The hum of a generator filled the corridor, masking smaller sounds, but she heard them anyway: the scrape of a spoon in the mess, the muffled cough of a soldier 2 doors down, the static pop of a radio resetting. War had trained her to listen between noises. And yet, no matter how much she strained, his silence was louder. Until it was. "You don't blink enough." His voice drifted through the steel like smoke. Smooth, unhurried, the first words he'd spoken in days. Her shoulders stiffened. She didn't answer. "I've been watching you," he continued. "You sit there like stone, but stone cracks, always does." She tightened her grip on the rifle, still didn't speak. "Tell me," he said softly, leaning forward into the light, "do you wonder if I deserve to die?" Her jaw locked. The scar on her wrist burned. Her brother's face flashed again. She forced the thought away, forced her voice steady. Doesn't matter what I think." His smile curved faintly. "It matters to you." She exhaled slowly, silently, willing her pulse to slow. He was probing, testing, looking for fractures in silence. She wouldn't give him one, not yet. Hours passed. Afternoon shadows stretched long, painting bars of light across the concrete. She barely moved, except to shift her weight or roll the ache from her shoulders. Fatigue was a battle of its own, the body begging for release, the mind refusing to yield. That was when another voice joined her. The young guard from last night. He leaned against the wall, helmet tucked under his arm, face pale but earnest. "Captain, can I ask you something?" Her eyes stayed on the cell. "Ask." Why'd they put you on him?" She didn't answer at first. The truth wasn't simple, wasn't clean. Finally, she said, "Because I've seen what silence can do, and because I failed to move when I should have." The boy frowned. "Failed." Her chest tightened. She hadn't meant to say it out loud, but it was too late now. The word hung between them like confession. "I hesitated once," she said. "It cost a man his life, a man I should have protected." The boy swallowed hard, shifting on his feet. "We all make mistakes, right?" She almost smiled, almost. Some mistakes don't end with forgiveness, some end with silence. The boy looked away, as if the weight of her words was too much. He muttered something about rounds to check and slipped off down the hall, leaving her with the prisoner again. This time when she looked through the glass, he was staring straight at her, eyes unblinking, smile gone. And in that moment she felt it. He knew. Somehow he knew. That night sleep refused to touch her. She sat in the dim corridor, the hum of lights above, the cold seeping through fatigues into her bones. Her eyes burned, but she kept them open, always open. At some point, hours into darkness, he spoke again. "Do you know what I did?" he asked, his voice low, steady, as though telling a bedtime story. She didn't answer. "I broke silence, that's all. I spoke when others told me not to, and men died for it. Do you believe that?" Her throat tightened. The rifle felt heavier in her lap. He leaned closer to the glass. "Tell me, Captain, when it comes, will you wait again, or will you finally move first?" Her heart pounded. She wanted to tell him to shut up, wanted to drown his words in her own, but she stayed silent because she had to. Still, in the quiet that followed, his question lingered like smoke. And she hated herself for knowing she didn't yet have the answer. By dawn she was exhausted, shadows under her eyes, movement stiff but posture still straight. She hadn't blinked enough, he was right. Her eyes burned from it, her mind fogged from it. The commander returned, silent as ever. He studied her with that same unreadable look, then the prisoner. "Convoy's ready," he said. "We move in 1 hour." Her stomach nodded. This was it. The mission would leave the hangar. Silence would stretch into open ground, and when it broke, everything would depend on what she did first. The commander turned to leave, then paused. "You have something to prove, Captain. Don't fail again." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because the truth was, she wasn't sure silence would save anyone this time. And the closer she looked into the prisoner's eyes, the more she feared it wasn't him she was guarding against. It was herself. What happens when silence meets open ground? That was the thought burning in her chest as the convoy engines rumbled awake, their growl echoing through the hangar like restless animals. She checked her rifle again, more out of ritual than necessity, chamber cleared, magazine loaded, optics cleaned. Her fingers brushed the scar on her wrist once more, that unconscious habit she could never shake, like she needed the reminder, like she deserved it. The prisoner was led out by 2 guards, wrists bound, chains rattling faintly with every step. He walked with the same calm he'd carried in the cell, his gaze sweeping the hangar, landing on her for just a fraction longer than anyone else. It wasn't arrogance. It was something quieter. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. She forced herself to look away first. The convoy rolled slow at first. 2 armored vehicles in front, 2 behind, hers in the middle. She sat across from him inside, knees braced, rifle across her thighs. The hum of the engine filled the space, mixed with the vibration of tires grinding gravel into dust. The others filled the silence with small talk, jokes, nervous laughs, the way soldiers always did when fear scratched just under the surface. One of them, Rodriguez, leaned his helmet against the wall and started humming under his breath, a song she recognized but couldn't place. It sounded almost like home. But the prisoner, he stayed silent, just sat chained between his wrists, resting on his knees, eyes steady, not defiant, not broken, just waiting. She hated that patience most of all. "Captain," Rodriguez said suddenly, catching her off guard, "you ever think about what guys like him were before all this, before the chains?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked to the prisoner, then back. Rodriguez was young, maybe 24, a grin always ready even when it didn't fit the moment. He had that restless energy that war hadn't yet carved out of him. "Doesn't matter," she finally said. "Doesn't it?" he pressed. "I mean, what if he was a father or, I don't know, some teacher somewhere? People don't just come out of the ground bad." Her jaw clenched. "People make choices, that's what matters." Rodriguez smirked, but it was softer now. "Guess you're right. Still feels weird, though, guarding a man like this. Like, what if he's not the monster we were told?" The prisoner's eyes lifted then, almost amused. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. Silence was enough. She didn't take the bait. She stared out the small, armored window instead. The land stretched endless, flat scrub and broken trees, dust curling behind them. Open ground. A place where silence could turn to chaos in seconds. And in her gut she felt it. Something was coming. Hours passed. The monotony of the road pressed down, thick and heavy. Soldiers shifted in their seats, stretched legs, dozed with heads bobbing against steel. Even Rodriguez's humming had faded. But she didn't relax, couldn't. Her eyes never left him. Every time he shifted his weight or tilted his head, she tracked it. Her finger never strayed far from the trigger guard. And yet the longer she stared, the more her certainty cracked. His calm wasn't arrogance. It wasn't even resistance. It was something else. A memory surfaced then, uninvited. Her brother the night before his deployment, sitting on the porch silent, the crickets filling in the words he never said. She begged him to promise he'd come back. He'd only smiled, faint, resigned. And he hadn't. She closed her eyes for a beat too long, and when she opened them, the prisoner was watching her. Like he'd seen it all, like he knew. Her chest tightened. She forced herself to look away. The attack came just after midday. One moment, the road stretched empty, heat shimmering above the dust. The next, the lead vehicle erupted in a blast that shook the ground, fire blooming against the sky. The shockwave rattled her teeth. "Contact!" someone shouted. Bullets raked the convoy, clanging against armor, glass spiderwebbing with cracks. Chaos swallowed silence. Her rifle was up before thought caught up. The world narrowed to muscle memory, sights, angles, bursts of movement outside the window, figures in the tree line, flashes of muzzle fire, the smell of burning fuel thick in her nose. Rodriguez cursed, firing blind through a crack. Another soldier screamed, clutching a leg that bled too fast. The vehicle rocked as tires shredded under fire. Through it all, the prisoner sat still, chained, calm, watching her. "Get him down," a sergeant barked, grabbing for restraints. "No," she snapped, louder than she meant. "He doesn't move." The sergeant glared but obeyed, throwing himself toward the window instead. The firefight raged, seconds stretching into eternity. She fired, reloaded, fired again, each round measured, precise. Training and instinct blended into one. But in the chaos, one truth clawed at her: the prisoner hadn't flinched. Not once. Not when the blast hit. Not when bullets shredded the air. He wasn't afraid. And that terrified her more than anything. The convoy broke through eventually. Reinforcements swept the flanks. the last echoes of gunfire fading into the dust. The air stank of smoke and metal, bodies sprawled along the ditch. Her vehicle limped on, one tire shredded, armor dented, blood staining the floor where a private had bled out before anyone could save him. His helmet still lay near her boots. She didn't look at it. Couldn't. Instead, her eyes locked on the prisoner. He finally spoke. "You moved," he said softly. "Not accusation, not praise, just fact." Her throat tightened. She forced her voice steady. "I did my job." He tilted his head, this time. Her chest burned. Words she wanted to throw back lodged in her throat. She turned away, jaw clenched so hard it ached. They stopped at a half-ruined outpost for the night. Soldiers scrambled to set perimeter, patch wounds, check ammunition. The dead were covered in tarps, waiting for transport home that might never come. She sat with her rifle again, outside his temporary cell, just a reinforced room in the outpost, walls pockmarked with bullet scars from wars past. Rodriguez came by, slower this time, his usual grin gone. His eyes were hollow, haunted. "Private Ellison," he said quietly, staring at the ground. He was 19, first mission out. She looked at him, seeing not just the grief but the fear underneath. That fear of becoming used to it, of losing count. He hesitated, Rodriguez whispered. He was trying to reload, hands shaking. He didn't even get a shot off. She put a hand on his shoulder, steady but brief. "It wasn't his fault, don't carry it." Rodriguez swallowed, nodding, but she saw the lie in his eyes. He would carry it. They all did. When he left, she turned back to the prisoner. He was watching again, always watching. "You think silence saves you," he said quietly, almost kindly. "But silence kills too. You know that better than most." Her scar throbbed as if he'd touched it. She gripped her rifle tighter, nails biting into palm. "Shut up," she whispered. But silence was already gone, and she couldn't bring it back. Later, when the outpost lights dimmed and exhaustion pressed heavy, she closed her eyes for just a moment. In that fragile space between waking and sleep, she heard it again, her brother's voice, not words, just presence. And then, over it, the prisoner. "When it comes, will you wait again, or will you move first?" Her eyes snapped open, breath sharp. The prisoner hadn't moved. His head was bowed, eyes closed as if asleep. But she knew better. Silence wasn't rest. It was strategy. And the war she feared most wasn't out there. It was here, inside. Dawn broke pale and thin, spilling across the ruined outpost. The convoy would move again soon. She rose stiffly, stretching aches from joints, eyes gritty with fatigue. The prisoner lifted his head, meeting her gaze one more time. "You're learning," he said softly. And for the first time, she realized he wasn't taunting her. He was warning her. But of what, she couldn't yet tell. Why did his eyes stay so calm when the doors blew open? That was the thought she couldn't shake, even as smoke bled through the hallway and gunfire ricocheted down the concrete. Calm eyes, the kind that didn't belong to a prisoner. Not really. She pressed her back to the wall, heartbeat matching the thump of boots moving closer. The guard detail had already taken cover, shouting over radios, scrambling to hold position. But she stayed still. Her rifle hugged her shoulder. One slow breath. Two. And in the middle of it all, him. Hands cuffed, sitting too neatly on the steel bench, face lit only by the emergency lights now stuttering above them. Not a twitch, not a flinch. Just those calm eyes, like he was waiting for something inevitable. She hated inevitability. The first man fell screaming near the stairwell, his helmet bouncing across the floor. Another curse. Another crack of return fire. The air filled with the acrid sting of burned powder, of cordite so thick it tasted metallic in her throat. She wiped her lips with her glove, kept her sight steady on the doorway. Her mind whispered the same loop, the same unfinished thought. Silence or movement. She wanted to ask aloud, wanted to demand an answer from the prisoner who just sat there, spine straight, breathing slow. Instead, she forced herself forward, sliding low across the hallway, scanning angles. A shadow moved where it shouldn't have. Her trigger finger flexed. One shot. The body dropped. Silence for a second. Her ears rang with it. That silence again. But the question didn't die with it, because quiet was never safe. It only meant the next move hadn't happened yet. "Captain, rear stairwell, now," a voice barked through the haze. She spun, eyes narrowing against the strobe of emergency lights. The lieutenant was there, crouched, rifle clutched too tight. His lips moved faster than his breath could keep up. She saw the terror on him, not cowardice, not weakness, just a boy who hadn't yet made peace with the idea of not going home. She recognized it. She'd worn it once. "I'll hold this," she told him, voice even, grounding. "Get the others clear." He shook his head, but... "Go," her tone cut sharper now, leaving no space for protest. He obeyed, not because he believed her invincible, but because her voice carried the weight of someone who had already made her peace. Another crash, another scream. The world dissolved into chaos. And still the prisoner didn't move. She turned her eyes back to him. He stared through the smoke, his expression almost tender, as if he pitied them all. That calm unnerved her more than the storm outside. What was he waiting for? She remembered the scar on her wrist, the one that kept her awake nights, the desert night, the broken comms, the voice she never answered in time, that silence that killed more than noise ever could. She clenched her jaw and felt her throat tighten against the memory. "Don't you dare," she whispered to herself, "not this time." Another shadow lunged from the doorframe. She fired too fast, too close. The recoil rattled through her shoulder and into her chest. Her breath stuttered. Another came, shouting words she didn't understand, barrel aimed square at her heart. She didn't think, she moved. Steel met flesh. Her rifle stock cracked bone before his shot landed. She shoved him down hard enough to feel the impact in her knees. The silence after was deafening. For the first time the prisoner's lips curved. Just barely, a smile. No, something colder, an acknowledgement, as if to say, "Yes, that's the move I was waiting for." Her pulse roared in her ears. Rage rose, quick and hot. Who was he to sit chained and smile? Who was he to wait her out like this? Boots thundered again. Reinforcements, their reinforcements. For now the corridor was theirs again. Men shouted, clearing rooms, dragging the wounded. One voice announced, "Area secure," though she knew better than to believe it. She turned away from the prisoner. She had to. Because if she looked any longer, she'd demand answers she wasn't ready to hear. And still in the back of her mind, the question returned, relentless. Could silence alone have stopped him? She strapped her rifle, forcing her hands steady. The lieutenant returned, face smeared with dust and sweat, voice trembling. "Captain, they're pulling us back to the convoy. They want him loaded now." Loaded. Moved. Taken back into the open world, where his silence could spread. Her chest tightened, but she nodded. "I'll move him." The chains rattled when she reached down. He rose willingly, calmly, like a man stepping into a role already written. For the briefest moment their eyes locked, and she hated what she saw in his, not fear, not defeat, but certainty. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped. It fell harder now, drumming on steel, turning dirt into mud. The night air carried the smell of smoke and iron. She felt the weight of it press into her lungs, heavy and bitter. The convoy engines roared to life. Soldiers barked orders, shoved crates, checked weapons. The wounded were loaded in silence, some staring at their own blood, some staring at nothing. She saw herself in each of them, fragments of her own ghosts. She placed the prisoner into the back seat, secured him, double-checked the locks. His lips parted for the first time, a whisper, low, almost gentle. "You moved first." Her body froze. No one else heard it, no one else even looked at him, but she did. Every syllable crawled under her skin. She slammed the door shut before he could say more. And as the convoy rolled forward into the dark, with the storm above and the silence inside, she finally let the truth settle. He wasn't waiting to escape. He was waiting for her. Why did the road feel longer in the dark? That was the thought gnawing at her as the convoy rolled deeper into the countryside. The rain hadn't eased. It only thickened, sliding down the bulletproof glass in slow, warping streams. Headlights struggled against it. The world outside was a blur of mud and shadows, punctured by the occasional flare of lightning. Inside the armored vehicle, silence pressed down on them all. Not the safe kind, not the peaceful kind, the other kind. The kind that stretched nerves thin until even the smallest creak of a seatbelt buckle made fingers twitch toward triggers. She sat opposite him. Her rifle rested upright against her shoulder, muzzle tilted just shy of his knees. She didn't relax, not even for a second. The chains clinked softly whenever the vehicle hit a rut. He didn't flinch, didn't adjust his posture, just sat there, hands folded neatly in his lap, eyes calm as ever. That calm was worse than any scream. The young lieutenant rode beside her, his rifle clutched so tight his knuckles had gone bone white. He kept sneaking glances at her, not at the prisoner, not at the rain-slick windows, but at her, like he was waiting for her to explain what none of them understood. She ignored him. She had to. If she let herself speak, she might admit what she feared. She didn't understand either. The driver cursed under his breath as the tires slid in the mud. The sergeant riding shotgun muttered prayers between gritted teeth. Their words blended with the hum of the engine, the rattle of gear, the steady thump of rain. And through it all, the prisoner watched her. Not with menace, not with mockery, with patience, as though every mile drawn forward only proved a point he had already made inside his own head. Her scar itched under the glove. She rubbed it once quick, then curled her hand into a fist. She hated when it did that, like memory trying to claw its way back into her flesh. She blinked, and for a second the vehicle wasn't the vehicle anymore. The rain wasn't rain. It was sand and wind and broken comms. It was another transport, another night, another silence. Her breath caught in her throat. She forced her eyes shut, inhaled sharp, exhaled slow. "Captain," the lieutenant whispered. Her eyes snapped open. She turned toward him with a look sharp enough to cut. He froze, shut his mouth, stared back down at his rifle. The prisoner smiled again, small, barely there, but real. She wanted to ask him why. Why the smile, why the patience, why her? Instead, she said nothing. Because silence, her silence, was the only weapon she still owned in this game she didn't fully understand. The convoy hit another rut. The lieutenant cursed. The sergeant barked something about keeping formation. A brief flash of radio chatter confirmed what she already suspected. Their route wasn't secure. Nothing was ever secure. A mile later, the first shot came. It cracked through the night like thunder, slamming into the side of the lead vehicle. Sparks flew, tires squealed, men shouted. The convoy lurched, engines straining, brakes screaming. Another shot followed. Then another. The air outside erupted into chaos. Ambush. Her body moved before her mind did. Rifle up, eyes sweeping windows, heart hammering against the inside of her ribs. She barked for the lieutenant to cover left. She pressed against the armored wall and scanned right. Figures darted through the rain, shadows with rifles. Flashes of muzzle fire painted the dark. Bullets pinged against armor, some slicing through glass in sudden shatters. Screams filled the comms. Engines roared. Orders clashed with panic. And in the middle of it all, he didn't move. The prisoner sat exactly as before, hands folded, calm eyes, watching her. A part of her wanted to scream at him, to demand that he feel something, fear at least, anger, anything, but he just waited, watched. And then he whispered. She almost missed it under the thunder of gunfire, but the words slipped through, soft, deliberate. "You'll move first." Her stomach clenched, rage flared. She pressed the barrel of her rifle against his chest. Hard, "Shut your mouth." But he only looked at her, and in his silence she heard the same echo of that old night, the same mistake, the same hesitation. Her finger twitched on the trigger. 1 inch of pressure, and this silence would end forever. A blast rocked the rear vehicle. Flames burst through the night. The lieutenant shouted something she didn't hear. The sergeant called for backup that wasn't coming. Smoke poured through broken glass, choking the cabin. And still she kept her finger steady, not pulling, not releasing, just frozen. The prisoner leaned forward, chains rattling, eyes locked on hers. His voice cut through everything else. Calm, almost kind. "Now, Captain, or never." Her heart stopped. Because in that exact second she realized the truth. The ambush wasn't about them. Not the convoy, not the soldiers. It was about her, about whether she would move first. Her throat tightened, breath ragged, sweat burning into her eyes. She wanted to scream, wanted to shoot, wanted to silence him once and for all. But instead she lowered the rifle, just slightly, just enough. And with that choice, the rain, the fire, the shouting, all of it seemed to fade. Because she finally understood. This wasn't a test of muscle, or aim, or courage. It was a test of silence itself. The prisoner leaned back against the seat, closed his eyes, his smile widened by a fraction. Outside, the convoy fought on. Inside, she fought something far more dangerous, herself. And in that quiet war, she wasn't sure who was winning. Why did the fire outside seem quieter than the silence inside? That question gnawed at her ribs as the convoy clawed its way through the night. Flames licked the rain-slick mud behind them, black smoke billowing upward, mixing with storm clouds. Men shouted orders, some wounded, some panicked, voices blurring into static over the radio. The ambush wasn't over, not by a long stretch. Yet none of that noise cut as deep as the hush between her and the prisoner. He sat chained, lips curved with that faint, unbearable calm. Eyes half closed, like he'd seen this play out before, like the chaos outside was just the punctuation on a story already written. And she, rifle pressed tight against her chest, couldn't stop herself from staring back. Her heartbeat still drummed against her eardrums, matching the thud of tires slamming into mud and gravel. But beneath the adrenaline, beneath the rage and fear, there was something she hated admitting. He had gotten inside her head. Every whisper, every pause, every time he watched her instead of the battle. He wasn't waiting to escape. He was waiting for her. The lieutenant across from her shifted uncomfortably, his helmet skewed from the earlier blast. His breathing came fast, too loud. He wiped blood from his cheek, someone else's, not his own. His lips trembled like he wanted to speak, but his eyes begged her not to make him. She knew what was in his chest, that tremor of fear, the desperate need for someone to make sense of it all. Once, years ago, she'd been him, looking at a captain in another convoy, begging silently for guidance. That captain had died in silence. No orders, no movement. And she'd learned then, when silence chooses you, it cuts. Her scar burned again, sharp under the glove. She pressed it against her thigh, as though pain could pull her back into the present. The prisoner finally opened his eyes again, spoke low, almost drowned by the storm. "You lowered your rifle. That was the first move." Her jaw locked. "Shut up," she whispered. But he didn't. His voice carried the rhythm of inevitability. "They don't see it yet, but you do. That's why you're here. That's why they put you in that chair facing me, because you've already lived this once, haven't you?" Her blood froze. The lieutenant's eyes darted between them, confusion growing. He couldn't hear the words, too soft, but he saw the weight. The air in the cabin thickened, harder to breathe. She leaned forward, rifle barrel tapping lightly against his chest, not pulling the trigger. Not yet. Her voice dropped to a razor's whisper. "You don't know a damn thing about me." He smiled, not cruelly, not mockingly, almost sadly. I know you carry ghosts in your silence." A crack of gunfire outside made the lieutenant jump. The convoy swerved violently, throwing them against the walls. She slammed her boot down, steadying herself, keeping her rifle balanced. The radio flared. "Convoy, this is Echo 3, East Ridge compromised. We're losing vehicles." "Static." Another voice. "We can't push through, we need to turn back." Then more static, a scream, nothing. The sergeant up front swore. "We hold this road or we're dead. Captain, what's your call?" Her? Why her? The commander should have been giving orders. But then she remembered. The commander's Humvee had been the first one hit. Smoke still clawed at the night where it burned. For a moment she didn't move, didn't speak. She felt the silence pressing in, demanding she freeze just as she had years ago. Her scar throbbed, her lungs locked. And then, no turn back, push forward, split into twos. Stagger fire left and right, don't give them a straight line. Her voice cut through the comms, steady as stone. The sergeant didn't argue. Engines revved. The convoy shifted formation. Gunfire erupted in disciplined bursts now, not panic sprays. The road ahead cleared, just barely, but enough. The lieutenant stared at her with something new in his eyes. Not fear, not confusion, something close to faith. But the prisoner only nodded. "You moved again." Her stomach twisted. His words felt like shackles around her throat. She wanted to scream at him, to drown him out. But the worst part, the unbearable truth, was that he wasn't wrong. Every choice she made now, every breath she took, felt like it was inside his game. The convoy pushed harder, tires chewing mud, headlights slicing rain. The ambush weakened behind them. Fire receded into the distance. For now, they had space to breathe. Inside the vehicle, though, the air stayed heavy. The lieutenant finally spoke, voice raw. "Captain, why does he keep looking at you like that?" Her lips parted. No words came. Because how could she explain the unexplainable? How could she tell this young soldier that silence itself was being weaponized against her? That every ghost she'd buried was clawing back to life in those calm, patient eyes? So she said nothing. She let the silence hang. The lieutenant looked away, jaw tightening. He'd wanted comfort, maybe even truth. She gave him neither. That guilt stung deeper than the bullet grazes on her vest. The prisoner tilted his head. Chains rattled softly. His smile lingered. "You'll understand, Lieutenant, one day." The boy flinched. "Don't talk to me." But his voice cracked, betraying the tremor in his chest. The prisoner didn't press. He didn't need to. The silence that followed was enough. Lightning split the sky, blinding white across the horizon. For a heartbeat, she saw the road ahead lit like daylight, empty, silent, waiting. And in that brief, brilliant flash, she felt it again, the same looping thought she couldn't kill. Could silence alone have stopped him? Or did she need to move first? The lightning faded, darkness returned. And so did the question. Why did the storm sound like footsteps when the convoy finally slowed? She couldn't shake it. Every patter of rain on the roof felt like someone packing above them, waiting to descend. The road had narrowed into a mountain pass now, flanked by cliffs that swallowed what little moonlight broke through the clouds. The engines strained against the incline. The soldiers whispered to one another, but not loud enough to believe their own words. She shifted her grip on the rifle. The metal felt cold against her gloves, slick from condensation. Opposite her, the prisoner hadn't moved. His eyes, calm as ever, remained fixed on her, like he could hear the rhythm of her heartbeat louder than the storm. The lieutenant beside her broke first. His voice trembled, low but desperate. "Captain, why him? Why's he worth all this?" She didn't answer. Not yet, because she didn't know. They hadn't told her at the briefing, not the real reason, just that he was critical, just that failure wasn't an option, just that she would be the one guarding him. And maybe that was the worst part. They didn't trust anyone else to sit across from this man. They trusted her silence, her ghosts. The lieutenant swallowed hard. He looked younger in the dim light, younger than she wanted him to be. He whispered again, softer. "Is he dangerous?" The prisoner smiled faintly, almost kind. "Only if she waits too long." The boy flinched, nearly raised his weapon. She snapped a hand against his barrel, pushing it down before it could rise. "Eyes forward," she ordered. "Don't listen to him." But the order rang hollow even to her ears, because she had listened. From the moment he spoke her name back in the hangar, she'd been listening. The convoy slowed further, engines downshifting. The radio crackled with the sergeant's voice. "Captain, the pass ahead is blocked. Landslide. We'll need to halt and clear it." Her blood ran cold. A stopped convoy was a dead convoy. She keyed the comm. "Negative, we don't stop." Static answered. Then the sergeant's voice again, sharper. "We can't move forward unless you want to drive into rock. 15 minutes tops." 15 minutes, in this silence with him. She looked at the prisoner. His chains glimmered faintly in the lightning. He leaned back slowly, deliberately, like a man settling into a theater chair before the final act. 15 minutes, he repeated softly. "That's all it takes." Her chest tightened. The vehicles ground to a halt. Doors opened. Boots splashed in mud. Men grunted, cursing at the sight of the landslide ahead. Shovels scraped rock. Metal chains rattled as they pulled debris. Inside her vehicle, the silence thickened. The lieutenant's breathing quickened. He wanted out, wanted to help clear, wanted to escape the weight pressing down inside this steel box. But his orders kept him here. With her. With him. The prisoner lowered his voice, just enough so only she could hear. "Do you know what they told me about you?" Her eyes narrowed. "Don't." He smiled. "That you were the one who didn't pull the trigger. That when the radio died, when your team screamed, you froze. And that silence killed them." Her throat burned. Her scar seared against her wrist like fire. She hated him. Hated the way his words knew exactly where to cut. The lieutenant looked between them, panic flickering in his gaze. "Captain, what's he talking about?" She didn't answer, couldn't. The prisoner leaned forward, chains clinked. His calm eyes never left hers. "You think you carry that alone, but silence like that, it echoes. It shapes the world long after the noise has faded." Her pulse thundered in her ears. For one terrifying heartbeat, she wanted to kill him. Not for what he was, not for the ambush, not for the danger, just for knowing. The lieutenant whispered again, shaking. "Captain, please tell me he's lying." Her lips parted, but no words came. The silence answered for her. Then the first explosion. It tore through the pass ahead, shattering the brief illusion of control. Rocks cascaded. Flames burst upward, painting the night in orange and black. Screams filled the comms. Ambush again. Gunfire erupted from the ridges. Shadows swarmed above, raining bullets down into the stalled convoy. Men dove for cover, rifles spitting fire upward. The sergeant's voice cracked over the radio. "They're on both sides. We're boxed in." The lieutenant jerked his rifle up, finger trembling on the trigger. His voice cracked. "What do we do, Captain?" The prisoner leaned closer. His whisper was ice. "Move, or watch them all die like before." Her lungs locked. The memory slammed back, the desert, the broken radio, the silence that killed. Her scar burned. The screams she never silenced echoed louder than the storm. And in that instant she moved. She grabbed the lieutenant's vest, yanked him down just as a round punched through the glass where his head had been. He gasped, stunned. She shoved him to the floor, her rifle already snapping to her shoulder, eyes scanning the ridgeline. One shot, a shadow dropped. Another. She fired again. The storm swallowed the echoes, but the bodies fell real enough. Her radio barked for orders. Men were panicking, pinned down. Her voice came sharp, decisive, undeniable. "Suppress left ridge. Vehicles 2 and 3 pivot. Use turrets now. Keep them blind while we clear the block." And they obeyed, Because silence was broken now. The prisoner smiled wider, not victory, recognition. Yes, that's who you are. She wanted to scream, wanted to shove the barrel through his chest, but she couldn't, because she knew deep down he was right. The firefight raged, rocks shattered, sparks flew. The convoy crawled forward inch by inch, men bled, men screamed, the storm drowned it all. And through it she realized something chilling. He didn't want to escape. He wanted her to move first, to prove something, to finish a silence years in the making. The lieutenant, pale and shaking, looked up from the floor. His voice cracked. "Captain, I thought silence was supposed to protect us." Her breath hitched. She looked at him, then at the prisoner. The words formed in her throat, raw and painful. Sometimes silence kills more than noise ever could. Lightning ripped the sky. Thunder shook the pass, and with it, the fragile balance inside her broke. She wasn't guarding a prisoner anymore. She was staring into a mirror. And the final move was coming. What made her step out of the compound when all she had to do was wait? The others begged her not to. The comms were already humming with relief. The target had been stopped, the guard had moved first, and the mission was complete. Silence itself had nearly been enough. Nearly. And yet she couldn't stay still. Her boots crunched against gravel as the dawn broke pale over the desert, painting the earth in washed-out gray. She carried no weapon now, just the weight of the night behind her. Her hands shook, not from fear, not from adrenaline, but from the stillness that followed everything. That haunting silence when purpose dissolves, when the voice in your head whispers, "You survived, but why you?" A local boy, no older than her brother had been when he died, peeked from behind the wall. His eyes carried the same question, the same silence. She crouched, meeting his gaze, not speaking. Sometimes words fractured moments like this. Sometimes dignity, grief, and resilience lived in quiet recognition alone. Her team watched from a distance. They wanted to move on, to leave this ground before it swallowed more of them. But they didn't rush her. They knew better. They had seen the choices she made in the night, the silence she had carried, the burden she would keep when the debrief stripped everything down to tactics and timing. She finally rose. No words, no explanations. The boy slipped away into the alleys like ghosts always did. She turned back toward the team, her shadow stretching long across the dirt. Later, she would be asked again in reports, in interviews, in the hollow briefings that claimed to capture truth. Could silence alone have stopped him? Or did the guard need to move first? She never answered, not directly. Because sometimes survival doesn't live in explanations. Sometimes it isn't about who fired, who froze, who moved. Sometimes it is about carrying silence forward, letting it speak when you cannot. And so, when she finally stood before the rows of names etched into a cold wall back home, she didn't salute. She didn't bow her head. She simply placed her hand against the stone, feeling the weight of all those who never returned, and breathed out the truth she had never spoken aloud. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And the silence endures.